ترشيح لعماد ميشيل عون.
المعارضة السورية هي اللي تحدد من يمثلها.
Good afternoon. You're watching the English newscast on Future Television. I'm Yumna Naufal, and these are today's top stories. The cabinet session scheduled to be held Thursday could spell difficulty if the failure to resolve the dispute on the appointment of top military officers compels certain parties to boycott it. There's a new currency circulating on the streets of Lebanon. It's known as the Good Note, a voucher that can be exchanged in stores in return for food and other essential items to help children on the streets. And the Saudi-backed Syrian opposition meets to decide whether to attend the UN peace talks, as wrangling over who will go threatens to derail the biggest push yet to resolve the country's civil war. Thank you for tuning in. Progressive Socialist Party leader MP Walid Jumblat is expressing admiration with the democracy in Iran, he says, citing the recent exclusion of the grandson of Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, founder of the Islamic Republic of Iran, from contesting elections next month. The MP said via Twitter, given its democratic record, perhaps Iran does not want the election of any MPs, or Michel Aoun as president. It is strange that Khomeini's son is unwanted, but this is democracy in its highest form in the Islamic Republic. Now, he was speaking sarcastically. Hassan Khomeini, a 43-year-old cleric with close ties to reformists, was not verified as having sufficient religious competence by the Guardian Council, Hassan Ahmad said on his Instagram account, despite testimony from dozens of religious authorities. A national dialogue session was held at Speaker Nabih Bidi's Ain al-Tini residence to address the latest developments in the country. Marada movement leader MP Sulaiman Frangieh revealed after the talks that the gatherers did not address the presidential deadlock. Asked why by reporters, he replied Speaker Bidi was the one steering discussions. He added he is still running for the presidency, revealing that his house is still open to rival candidate Change and Reform Bloc MP Michel Aoun. Aoun was not present at the talks, but Foreign Minister Jabran Basid represented him at the dialogue. He left without making a statement. Meanwhile, loyalty to the resistance bloc MP Ali Fayyad told reporters that an agreement was reached among the gatherers on the contentious military appointments file. The next session of the dialogue is set for February 17th. The government is scheduled to meet on Thursday, and it remains to be seen if the bloc will attend it. Speaking of the session scheduled for Thursday, the failure to resolve the dispute on the appointment of top military officers will likely compel the Free Patriotic Movement, Hezbollah, and the Tashanak Party ministers to again boycott the cabinet session. The same ministers boycotted a session that was held on January 14th because the appointment of top officers at the military council was not on the agenda. This week's session has 379 items on the agenda and does not include controversial issues. The cabinet has been paralyzed for months over the ongoing dispute on the appointments and the decision-making mechanism in the absence of a president. The ministers of the consultative gathering, led by former President Michel Sulaiman, want the officer to be chosen based on his ranking and the standards of the military institution. While founder MP Michel Aoun of the FPM has nominated Brigadier General Samir al-Haj, who comes fifth in the rank. Another controversial issue that arose last week is Rifi's attempt to transfer the trial of former Minister Michel Smeha from the military tribunal to the Judicial Council. In other news, in Lebanon, there's a new currency circulating on the streets of the country. It's known as the Good Note, a voucher that can be exchanged in stores in return for food and other essential items. The idea behind this initiative is to ensure that children begging on the streets are given the vouchers instead of money, which some say could fall into the wrong hands. This charitable initiative is created by Lebanese supermarket Boukhalil, as well as a local NGO and marketing firm, J. Walter Thompson, Beirut. General Manager of Boukhalil Supermarket, Shawi Boukhalil, explains how the coupon works. One good note is the equivalent of 1,000 Lebanese liras, just under $1. The sight of children begging at the side of the roads or weaving in between cars asking for money is a common occurrence here in Beirut. According to Boukhalil Supermarket, staff have received training to help the children when they come into the stores to select items. Dar Bistro, a cafe and bookshop, is one place where the coupons can be purchased. One of the bistro's managers, Fadi Mansour, says the type of people that the customers at Dar are people who like to read and like change, and they want change to start here. And so a good note is an initiative that will change a lot of things for marginalized children or those that have found themselves in the streets without any sources for a dignified way of living being available to them. Human Rights Watch is renewing its criticism of the Lebanese government's policies towards Syrian refugees and protesters. As security challenges in Lebanon's mount, so do concerns about the government's failing to adequately protect human rights, according to Nadim Houri, the HRW Deputy Middle East Director. He said this in the group's annual World Report, which noted that authorities have been imposing restrictive and costly residency renewal regulations for Syrian refugees since January of 2015, causing many of them to lose their legal residency. Houri added that protecting the rights of the Lebanese as well as Syrian refugees is the right thing to do and the best way to ease the tensions in the country. HRW also condemned a heavy-handed crackdown by security forces against protesters in August who demanded an end to the waste crisis. The country's state prosecutor tasked a military court judge to investigate the violence, but the results of the investigation remain unclear. The Saudi-backed Syrian opposition met to decide whether to attend UN peace talks as wrangling over who will go threatens to derail the biggest push yet to resolve the country's civil war. The negotiations were already delayed from Monday over the issue of who will represent the myriad forces opposing President Bashar al-Assad in Syria's nearly 5-year civil war. The talks are part of a UN-backed plan agreed by top diplomats last year in Vienna that envisages negotiations followed by the creation of a transitional government, a new constitution, and elections within 18 months. The roadmap is the most ambitious plan yet to end the conflict, which has left more than 260,000 dead and forced millions from their homes. Russia, a key ally of Assad, has pushed for a broader range of opposition at the talks, with Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov saying on Tuesday that negotiations will not achieve results if Syria's Kurds are not represented. The talks come as Syrian government forces have made important military gains in recent weeks, backed by airstrikes launched by Moscow last September. Syrian refugees say that they have very low expectations for the upcoming Geneva III Convention, which is set to start this Friday. Around 85,000 Syrian refugees currently live in Zaatari, in Jordan, about 15 kilometers from the border with Syria, and now one of the world's largest refugee camps. The United Nations Special Envoy for Syria, Staffan de Mistura, sent out the invitations to the delayed talks without saying who had been invited or how many groups might participate. Earlier, the opposition had cast doubt on whether it would go to Geneva, accusing the United States of adopting unacceptable Iranian and Russian ideas on solving the conflict. Syrians at the Zaatari refugee camp expressed little hope that their situation in the war-torn country would change anytime soon. Jordan currently hosts more than 1.4 million refugees, with most of them living in urban areas and around 100,000 Syrians in the camp. Coming up next, Academy Award-winning Mexican director Alejandro Iñárritu talks to Oscar-nominated Leonardo DiCaprio. We'll be right back with the latest. Welcome back. You're watching the 1620 o'clock news here on Future Television. Iranian President Hassan Rouhani wrapped up a visit to Italy before heading to France on the second leg of a trip signaling Tehran's rapprochement with Europe after sanctions were lifted against the Islamic Republic. Rouhani's visit to Paris is expected to result in the signing of major business contracts on the heels of multi-billion-dollar deals in Italy. An order for 114 Airbus planes to modernize Iran Air's aging fleet is expected to be confirmed in France, along with tie-ups with car makers Peugeot and Renault. Rouhani concluded his two-day trip to Rome with a visit to the Colosseum with Italian Culture Minister Dario Franceschini and a press conference. Asked whether Iran would apologize to Saudi Arabia for an attack on its embassy that led to Riyadh cutting diplomatic ties with Tehran, Rouhani said it was not up to his country to make a move for reconciliation. The president is accompanied by a delegation of more than 100 ministers, officials, and businessmen, marking the return of Iran on the international economic stage with the lifting of sanctions after the historic deal over Tehran's nuclear program. Here's a story making headlines. We spoke about HRW, Human Rights Watch report a little earlier on. Well, they released another one talking about the governments of the globe. Some governments, they say, are imposing the biggest clampdown on civil society in a generation, fearful that the emergence of social media may stoke popular protests. In Europe, 1 million new refugees in 2015 have prompted governments to tap fears about security to curb liberties, despite a failure to demonstrate such restrictions can prevent attacks. According to the New York-based group, in its 659-page annual review of more than 90 countries' human rights record in 2015, such measures help counter the potential of popular sites like Facebook and Twitter that are mobilizing people when conventional media is tightly controlled. Meanwhile, Europe's increasing tendency to raise the gates to Syrian and other refugees has coincided with the rise of populist political parties exploiting Islamophobia. In Germany, anti-migrant protests have turned violent. Chancellor Angela Merkel has called on Germans to think about the opportunities the migrants will represent for the country, while in the United States, Republican frontrunner Donald Trump called for an outright ban on Muslims entering the country following the shooting carried out by a Muslim couple that killed 14 and wounded 22 last December in California. HRW is advising that rather than force refugees to risk their lives in illegal crossings at sea, Europe could set up centers in Syria's neighbors like Turkey and Lebanon, helping them to better screen asylum seekers who could pose security threats. Academy Award-winning Mexican director Alejandro G. Iñárritu called Best Oscar nominee Leonardo DiCaprio a warrior at a Mexico City news conference to support their survival drama, The Revenant. Filmed in Canada and Argentina under tough conditions, the plot is based on the 1820s true story of Hugh Glass, who seeks revenge after being abandoned by members of his own hunting team following a brutal mauling from a bear. The film looks likely to be an Oscar frontrunner with 12 nominations this year. It recently picked up 3 awards at the Golden Globes: Best Drama Actor for DiCaprio, and Best Director for Iñárritu.
So much has been talked about, like I said, of the difficulty of making this movie and all the things that Alejandro demanded for authenticity. For me as an actor, that's exactly what I want when I step on set. That's the best possible scenario. Yeah, the situations were tough for the actors and the crew. We were out in freezing cold temperatures, far off locations, but you want to work with a director that is looking at every frame of that film under a microscope so you can do your job well. Camera movements and these things that are groundbreaking, and they happen seemingly by accident, but I know so much thought was put into it by Alejandro and Chivo together, working for months and months beforehand, and both of them coordinated these shots in such a masterful way that was so wonderful for me as an actor to work with, because I got to just focus on what I had to do performance-wise. So
This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our headlines. A cabinet session scheduled to be held Thursday could spell difficulty if the failure to resolve the dispute on the appointment of top military officers compels certain parties to boycott the session. There is a new currency circulating on the streets of Lebanon. It's known as the Good Note, a voucher that can be exchanged in stores in return for food and other essential items to help children on the streets. And the Saudi-backed Syrian opposition meets to decide whether to attend the UN peace talks, as wrangling over who will go threatens to derail the biggest push yet to resolve the country's war. Those are your Wednesday headlines live on Future Television. I'm Yumna Nelfa signing off. Have a good night.
لتمسيح لعماد ميشيل عون.
المعارضة السورية هي بتحدد من يمثلها.